Please keep
Please
pursuing.
get there outside. You coming?
Yeah, Hugh, give it to me. Yeah,
Alright.
give it to me, Hugh. Another 1 billion to Disney Marvel. Truly life-changing.
I have a question. Do you ever think an alternate universe version of yourself exists out there that isn't a total fucking disappointment? Let's talk multiverses. No, not the Warner Brothers fighting game featuring LeBron James. I'm talking about the mainstream takeover of them in the last 5-ish years. You know of them. Alternate versions of your favorite characters with a different coat of paint. You may like them, you may hate them. One thing is for sure, there is not a shortage of them. You think your precious little franchise is the only one using multi-dimensional traversal? Trust me, it has made its way into so many other forms of media. Maybe to the point of abundance? I don't know, that depends on your personal taste. For me, I can see where people are coming from lately when they say that it's just a lazy form of storytelling. I mean, when you have an unlimited supply of alternate versions of a character, danger and the ultimate risk of death becomes, how can I say this, inconsequential. Why get emotionally attached to a specific version if there's always going to be a backup? It's the same psychology behind how a narcissist works. There's always an endless supply to suit their needs. Now, once in a while, a show or movie does come out that adds all new elements to the multiverse concept. Now, when Disney Marvel first introduced the concept of the multiverse, it was pretty intriguing at first, and it did feel refreshing to watch. And I would be lying if I said they didn't strike gold at times, by bringing together fan favorite iterations of a character together. The most recent example being Spider-Man No Way Home, and we all remember how much of a hit that was. Even if the context of how they brought these characters together in the context of the plot doesn't make any sense, you still get excited due to one simple phrase: nostalgic fan service. It's the term that gets your dopamine and serotonin levels going, that will just chuck any sense of logic you look for in a story just out the window. And once Disney Marvel gets a hold of that formula, especially once they get the rights to multiple franchises, that is when you know they're going to be playing a dangerous game that will clash against your better judgment for the sake of seeing your favorite characters on the screen again. I'm not saying I've never fallen for this tactic, it's worked. Don't ask questions, consume product, they say, and I'm probably gonna get suckered into it again. But maybe by the end of the day, as long as you had fun, was there really anything lost? That's the argument I'm gonna make, at least the one I'm gonna keep telling myself with this one. Now, when it comes to Deadpool, I found out about him when I was in middle school, back when they were promoting his video game that catered to gratuitous violence and witty fourth wall breaking. I mean, what else was a 12 to 13-year-old supposed to gravitate towards? And once word got around that a movie was supposed to be happening that basically followed the same format as the video games, of course my pubescent little brain was excited to see that shit. By the time they were coming out, I was in high school, and the edgy toilet humor was the peak of comedy for me at the time. And even rewatching them now recently, I still really like them. The first Deadpool movie came as a shock of how great a lower stakes romantic comedy style format to the superhero formula can be. And the second movie injected just the right amount of over-the-top action comedy tropes that is just as hilarious as the first movie to me. And this came out during the time when the Marvel Cinematic Universe was setting up something big with the Infinity Saga, back when they were setting up multiple crossovers that were to come with each installment. So because of that, it was nice to have this franchise that was more self-contained, but wasn't afraid to make fun of all the other properties that were coming out at the time, especially making fun of the stuff that was outside of its own universe. Now, I didn't really watch much of the other Fox Studios X-Men universe movies. The only ones I remember seeing in theaters, X-Men First Class and Logan, if I recall. Apparently, from both general and hardcore audiences, they are seen as some of the best ones in that universe. And knowing that, I have little to no desire to watch the other movies then. But even though I didn't see the movies, I still understood the reception they received and what problems people had with them. So it was still fun to hear Deadpool just poke jabs at all the different things that the studio was doing at those times. It just made fun of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And for the most part, I was able to get the references and still have a stupid fun time with these movies. But it appears the hierarchy has changed in the MCU. Now that the MCU had its big, satisfying conclusion with the Infinity Saga, they still have continued to push the multiverse storyline. Despite most of its Phase 4 and Phase 5 reception, there was basically big discussion if Deadpool 3 can steer the MCU back into the path of the glory days. And with Disney Marvel now taking over the Fox Studios properties, and with them being transparent from the very beginning of this movie's production of Hugh Jackman returning once again to be the Wolverine, despite a pretty satisfying conclusion to that character's legacy, can they really put the current MCU back in the spotlight? It's a rhetorical question, I'll answer it right now. Deadpool and Wolverine. Deadpool is offered a place in the Marvel Cinematic Universe by the Time Variance Authority, but instead recruits a variant of Wolverine to save his universe from extinction. So the biggest question I had, as well as I'm sure many people did, would be how were they going to address Hugh Jackman returning back as Wolverine without messing with his proper send-off all those years ago in Logan? To quote Deadpool himself, They don't. Just like with No Way Home, I'm sure the writers were just like, you know what? Fuck it. We're gonna give the people what they want. It doesn't matter how it works out. Multi-dimension is the way to go. Even if it doesn't work narratively speaking, it's gonna make the fans go wild. And it gives the impression from the very beginning that they just do not give a flying fuck about hurting the die-hard fans' widow feelings. They are literally gonna dig up his grave for money.
Am I really gonna defile this grave for money? Of course I am!
And thankfully, I'm not one of those butthurt lunatics. So frankly, I don't care. If it's a justifiable reason where in the case of Deadpool, he can quite literally do anything, especially messing with the audience, which would be very much in character, I think it works enough. And it also gives the impression early on that, at least in this script, well, I guess you could also say this about the other Deadpool scripts, he is mostly here for laughs against the conventional rules of storytelling, for the sake of comedy. This character is protected by so many layers of irony, it just works. I'm mostly checked out of the MCU right now, so I'm really all just for watching him poke fun at the MCU, if anything. I'll touch more on what this movie means for the MCU later on. So besides all the trailers, I had brief knowledge of knowing what current MCU titles this movie would tie into. Most prevalent would be Loki. I guess this is a better time than any to quickly put out there that I just have no desire to watch any of the Disney Plus series. They just all look equally boring to me, I'm sorry. I'm aware that that series introduced the concept of the multiverse, and it seems it's just caused a lot of problems for Disney Marvel to deal with, both narratively and casting wise. My biggest concern was that any elements outside of the established Deadpool universe stuff, that includes its world and characters, would be too intrusive and it would just make it feel like it's just like any other MCU current slop. And I think for the most part, they don't, thankfully. There's just the right amount of screen time with recognizable MCU characters to remind you of where this franchise is going now. But most of this movie's runtime, I would say, is dedicated to Deadpool and Wolverine, with a bunch of other surprise Fox Studio characters that I'm sure many were not expecting to see here. Ones that just haven't seen the light of day in so many years, or they're getting their grand introduction in live action here. Great surprises in store for those who actually recognize all these characters. The movie is definitely a lot more funny if you know who all these characters are. At this point, you guys don't care about spoilers, right? It's been out for a minute. Spoiler alert for the gratuitous cameos that I'm sure everybody would expect at this point. Biggest surprise include Chris Evans returning as Johnny Storm. That really caught me off guard. I completely forgot he was in those original Fantastic Four movies. A buzz cut really goes a long way for a white boy. Jennifer Garner returning as Elektra. I'm gonna be completely honest, I completely forgot who her character even was. I think it's just because her abilities seem to be the most bland compared to everybody else in this movie. Maybe the fight choreography just didn't do her all that much justice, but that's just my thoughts. But my favorite aspect about her was the callback to her ex-husband Ben Affleck that played Daredevil. I thought that was a pretty funny call out. Matt Damon's gonna be pissed. Blade, I'm sure, was hyped for all the old heads to see him on the screen again. Pretty awesome though how Wesley Snipes was able to come back after over 20 years from the big screen and kick some ass. His range in weapons and combat was pretty badass to watch. I'm pretty sure Blade was one of the first big hit live action comic book movies, which eventually led to the X-Men franchise being established, and the rest is history. We really do owe this long journey of comic book adaptations to that character. His statement on being the only existing Blade to ever exist, followed by Deadpool's deadpan look into the camera, and his inability to understand Deadpool's use of the word retired, were definitely highlight moments for sure with that character for me. Channing Tatum as Gambit was hilarious and endearing because it wasn't until after I saw this movie did I find out about his push to want to play the character in a live action standalone movie, but it ultimately fell through. So this seemed to be the next best thing where it felt like a decent compromise for Channing to actually shine and play this character for once, because you could tell he really cares about it. Also, I had no idea Gambit had a thick Cajun accent, so it just made all of Channing's dialogue just way more hilarious because I had no idea what the hell he was saying most of the time. And of course, Daphne King returning as Logan's daughter, or X-23 according to the multiverse nerds. It felt sweet to see her and Hugh share the screen together again after many years. Kind of like an epilogue or even a new beginning for these characters. And nice touch to have her put on those same glasses that she stole at the gas station from Logan. Now for the completely new first time coming into live action type characters goes to this movie's villains. Matthew McFadden as Mr. Paradox gave more of a comedic performance where you don't really see him as a formidable threat, but rather just the guy to give exposition towards the main plot lines of this movie. He's just so classy, and it is admittedly fun to see if you've seen Succession because all you'll ever be able to see and hear is just Tom. But without Greg present, it's just an incomplete omelet. But definitely the main baddie in this one was Cassandra Nova. I had no idea she existed until this movie. An unhinged, demented twin of Charles Xavier who never learned to restrain her powers is pretty neat in theory. Her range of dark psychic abilities look really cool, and it feels more like a formidable threat to the psyche of Deadpool and Wolverine. A foe that goes for more of the psychological torment route, on top of some real painful looking physical torture methods with her abilities. I thought she was pretty interesting. everything until the very last act. It just feels like her character falls apart in the last act, where she just resorts for ending every universe so she can play God. It just feels so pale in comparison of how she started. At least for me, I'm drawn more to villains that go for emotional damage. The actress did a good job with what she was working with, I'll give her that. And the same ideas I feel about her character can also be applied to the locations this movie mostly takes place in. The Void Universe. Cool as a concept, but in executions, it leaves a lot to be desired. Compared to the locations of even the previous Deadpool movies, it feels pretty drab and devoid of life to look at. I mean, it could have been the whole point of the movie, I suppose. It's basically a garbage dump, but even the movie reference on how it looks like a Mad Max ripoff. And considering how there was a literal Mad Max movie that came out this year that perhaps had the most sauced up looking desert wasteland to date, maybe a little bit more color would have gone a long way. But hey, I guess the defense is that you don't go to these movies to see the plot or character development. You are here to see fan favorites collide. Okay, sure, if you could turn your brain off and dismiss any plot holes present for the sake of a fun time, I could see it. Thankfully, the dynamic duo of the very title of this movie does live up to the hype. Deadpool and Wolverine's growing relationship, from bitter annoyance to rambunctious partners in crime, is the star of the show. At this point, it just feels like Ryan Reynolds has injected his real life persona into this character that we don't even think about it anymore. He's always witty and stupid, and he always goes for the low blow insults to everyone that shares the screen with him. That screams pop culture or member berries. That includes making fun of himself as well, which I can always appreciate. But that's the description of the character, the merc with the mouth. It would feel very jarring if he didn't go for the deep cuts at this point. The best one being roast to the real life actors playing these characters that Ryan is actually friends with. But a part of me does wish that we saw more of the actual dedicated Deadpool universe characters that these movies have spent nearly a decade building. They are only briefly shown in the first and last acts. It just kind of feels like most of their screen time just got cut out for the theatrical release. And I think it's one of the biggest things missing from this movie's main storyline, because the main motivation behind Wade doing all this multi-dimensional hero work is to keep his own timeline from being deleted. He states how his entire universe are those characters in his dedicated universe, who have gone to witness him at his all-time lows, not just when he's being a wisecracking idiot. They're put at such a high pedestal, yet we don't really see them at all. Not even during the building stakes of the multiverse colliding. It is certainly a choice. It would have added a lot more sentiment to this movie's overall cluttered plot. Maybe they'll release an alternate cut with deleted scenes just like they did with Deadpool 2. But again, hey, we're not here for them. We're here for Hugh. What's interesting is that they made it clear before production even began for this movie of how they'll be focusing on a different variant of Wolverine, which does pave the way for so many more deep cut references to so many different iterations of Wolverine in different comics. And thankfully, you don't have to be a mega fan to enjoy a good old montage of Deadpool multiverse hopping and running into all these different Wolverines. But I did have one glaring issue that held back Hugh's Wolverine in this movie. Because this is a version of Wolverine of which we haven't seen anything from his universe, any and all motivation from him feels a little bit hollow. We are constantly told of what he did to screw up his whole universe, on how he basically ditched his version of the X-Men, how he has such deep regrets about it, and is why he chooses to put on the cowl, to honor and remember his fallen X-Men. The general rule of compelling storytelling: show, don't tell. We are constantly told about all this, but we are never shown it. I think I speak for many others here where I feel a lot more sentiment towards just the idea of Hugh returning as Wolverine again, because it's clear of how much he loves and cares for this role. You can really feel it when his performance gets actually rather existential, surprisingly, for a Deadpool movie. But it's held back by the lack of knowing more about this specific Wolverine. I understand not messing with the variant we saw die in Logan, but a part of why that character's send-off was very impactful, it's because that is the version that people have been seeing on the screen for many years. But besides that glaring issue for me, I think everything else involving Hugh's performance and return as Wolverine was fantastic. And for those on the internet saying that his legacy is tarnished due to him coming out of retirement from the character, I mean, I'm sure that Disney money is really nice. I'm sure if any of us were in Hugh's position, we would absolutely take that Disney money deal till he's 90. And I don't even read comics, but even I know that they have a common practice of bringing characters back to life for the sake of keeping a story going. It's not that deep, bro. It's just superhero fun. And even the most casual moviegoers that don't know shit about comics can still have fun with the comedy and gory aspects of this movie. There are too many hilarious and sauced up moments in this movie to go over all of them, but there are some special highlights I would like to shout out to. Deadpool using Logan's deteriorating corpse to kill a bunch of TVA soldiers 5 minutes into the movie. When Ryan and Hugh mentioned early on in this movie's production that they wouldn't be touching Logan. Pretty epic troll, actually. A random ass Deadpool timeline shown where Thor's crying for him, and the entire cast just completely keeps it in the dark as to why he was crying. Why was store crying. Deadpool's suit-up scene involving a lot of crotch honks and cheek slaps. The editing was just so intentionally stupid, it reminded me of YouTube poop. Henry Cavill as a surprise guest star for the Calverine version of Wolverine. It just felt like a huge fuck you to his treatment in the DCEU, which just felt right. Johnny's death made it seem like Deadpool was just gaslighting us, but confirmed at the very end that he indeed was an epic shit talker. The variant of Deadpool that's just Ryan plays as a big counter to everything we've seen this character represent. Alongside Dogpool, they casted the Doge that was voted by some evil bastard as being the most ugly dog in the world. So happy they cast that little ray of sunshine into this. Deadpool and Wolverine's showdown in the Honda Odyssey that low-key had some sexual undertones to it. The tilt down to the coexist bumper sticker, comedy gold. Also Wolverine FNAF jump scare moment, probably my favorite shot in the whole movie. The climactic fight where all the Deadpool variants with the ridiculous designs and special guest star actors behind their voices just represents the pure blast energy this movie had to offer. Did not know that was Matthew McConaughey, that's pretty hilarious. Peter of all characters playing as one of the most important roles in the entire multiverse to all Deadpool. It was such a stupid and hilarious way to end off the Deadpool debacle. And of course Hugh's peak physique being shown off in this movie's emotional climactic ending, when both he and Deadpool had to sacrifice themselves to save all the timelines. Why did just his shirt get blown off? It's just so stupid. I love it. It just culminates together for a time which I can just call pure fun. But for those that would rather have a cohesive and structurally sound plot, fair enough for wanting that out of a movie. But this is the same genre that is referred to as cape shit by many. There's a reason the actual artistry of visual storytelling isn't the thing that people remember these movies for. I mean, the movie never even really attempted to go for the top shelf academic levels of storytelling and characters. Maybe it did for those that don't really watch a ton of movies, but I won't deny that the craft of this project just felt like it did come from a place of pure love and respect for the source material. And this segment's into the final topic that I want to discuss with this movie, and that is, what does the massive success of this movie mean for the future of the MCU? Time will tell what Kevin Feige wants to do with where this movie leaves off, but if I were to give my input, yeah, I generally don't know. And to be frank, I don't really care. After Endgame, and especially after Guardians 3, I feel emotionally checked out of this universe. The only things that remotely have my attention at this point in the MCU are sequels for the installments that have been out before Endgame. But it doesn't mean that I'll go into the projects I choose to watch with pessimistic goggles on. If I can still be entertained by what I paid money to see, I leave the theater happy. And I did leave the theater happy with this movie. I had fun with this movie. Ever since it was announced that this movie would be touching on the multiverse subjects, I was really hoping for one thing: for Deadpool to poke fun at all of Disney Marvel's current business practices. I never cared if Deadpool was going to save the MCU. By the way, the discussion on one movie every other year saving the MCU is just stupid to me. You people realize that it would take consistent hits throughout many years with a connecting, progressing storyline to reach the same heights as the Infinity Saga, right? One box office hit every once in a while is not enough to gain back audience retention. I only look forward to all the call-outs this movie had to make for the current state of the franchise, and this movie delivered on that. And even though I don't have nostalgia for the X-Men 20th Century Fox X-Men franchise, I'm aware they have their dedicated audience that always stuck with them through thick and thin, during its praise highs and criticize lows. And what this movie felt more like was a send-off homage to those 20th Century Fox movies. All the different confusing timelines and all. It was apparent in the end credits of this movie, where they showed a behind-the-scenes montage of Ryan, Hugh, and everyone else's time working on those movies from the very beginning. It was clear they were paying respect to them all, and how they acknowledged this whole project wouldn't exist without those older movies. It's wholesome. They showed even the most trashed on movies from that franchise. It seems they were just proud of everything they've accomplished together. It just makes it feel like this whole production was made by actual soulful humans, instead of being churned out by soulless out-of-touch executives. It leaves a sweet taste in the mouth, and it makes it feel like this is all an end of an era rather than a new beginning. One thing cannot be denied though: I don't care who you are or what you thought of this movie's quality as a whole, but this is without a doubt the biggest piece of fan service Marvel has put out since No Way Home. Maybe once in a while that's all people want, and maybe that's not inherently a bad thing. I'm just glad they got to deliver this team up at least once, that I know people have been waiting to see for a very long time. 8 out of 10, stupid fun that felt like an homage to its characters' legacies and longtime fans. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm gonna get one more good use out of this bucket before I resell it on eBay.